Hi guys, so Anthony with Austin Historical Weapons Guild again, back today with some more longsword work. Again, today we're going to be building off of the previous videos and kind of just jumping off from there and not doing a whole lot of review and working from things. So last videos we were talking kind of working from high guards and going this idea of being able to work from the shoulder. So when we are working from the shoulder, we have given up all of our structure to throw things quicker and faster. So again, from high, this entire position is in structure. My arms are straight, my back's engaged. I can pull through my cut, and no matter where in this arc I strike my pellet, strike my target, I've got my body behind me. However, the problem with this is it's big, it's slow. You can kind of see it coming from a long way away. So a more common position you see is from the shoulder here. The problem with this, though, is with my little T-Rex arms, I don't have a lot of power or structure in this position. The point of working from this high position, though, is you get comfortable moving this position quickly. So when I go to throw a cut from my shoulder, I throw out to that arc I've previously worked on and follow through like I normally would. This makes it a much quicker, faster action than starting here and pulling all the way down. And really the key of this is just getting comfortable with this position, throwing out to that arc we've previously defined from high guard, and it'll pull through the motion from there. And obviously, if structure is important all the way through, when working on rising cuts, that same rules are going to be applied. Rising cuts are something that, by and large, aren't terribly useful. They're not great opening cuts from the outset before the swords are engaged, the swords are binding. There's a lot of motion to cover. You're fighting gravity. You're exposing yourself to being overbound. It's not a great starting point. That said, it's important to have that in your skill set, especially if you get into competitions and cutting events. Being able to throw a rising cut and coming through is important. So throwing a rising cut, it's not, I mean, it is as simple as I'm high, I go low, I turn my sword over, I go back high again. But there's some more nuance to it than that. While learning a rising cut, learning the motion, I find it's easier to start with your feet backwards. So a general rule of thumb we have is that whatever side your sword is on, that foot is back. And it works great for overhauls, these falling cuts, things like that. But when you're throwing a rising cut, it's a little bit easier than instead of starting like this and trying to step through and push up. If I start my right foot forward, sword down here, this is a much more natural position to sit in compared to this, because now I'm kind of pulling away and already chambering my hip more than I want. So I can sit here very comfortably. And the same thing is applying. All I'm gonna do is lifting my arms and turning my hip as I step. And the important thing to think about while you're doing this is step is no longer going to be forward. I'm moving off to my left at an angle. So from here, as I lift up, I'm going to turn and pull across. And this motion, as you can see, is a much easier, much simpler motion. So arms stay straight. I pick up my hands vertically. As I do that, I step to the side. I get a nice clean cut through that line. So again, just working, real simple motion, building up those base motions. Same thing if working the other side. I find it much easier to start off with having your opposite foot forward, hands together, so I can step off to my right, letting my body pull and drive through. So this is a much easier motion to work with than trying to get down here easily. Here, my arms are a little bit more crunched, a little bit tighter, and trying to come across is a little bit harder to get those lines. Once you're comfortable with this, especially with this straight leg forward here, you can start doing this cut from a more protracted position. So just like we have high von Tog, we're throwing these, I can do it from my shoulder the same way. Notice first thing I'm doing is I'm throwing out to that angle, that circle I had before, to pull through. I can start doing the same thing with my rising cuts. So from here, arms are nice and long and straight, structure the entire time. I pull, I step through, get a nice clean cut. If I want to start throwing this cut from this position, or realistically anywhere else, I need to know where this circle is. This arc I'm describing with my sword, I need to know where that is. Once I have that, I can throw this cut here. I can start this cut there. I catch that circle. I finish my motion. And this makes it a much faster, much more efficient action. And again, I don't like it for opening cuts with sparring. Your hands are exposed. You have to start doing really weird things to get this out there. And you're losing a lot of your range of your cut to keep your hands protected and safe. So I really don't recommend these rising cuts to open up your sparring. But for thoroughness, for practicing that structure, practicing this motion, it's important to be able to throw good rising cuts from any position. Once you start getting comfortable with doing it with your same side leg forward, practice it with the reverse feet, with your dominant leg back from your right side here. And we're really looking for, again, the same motion here, right? I want my sword to move in a straight path. I don't want any kind of arcing, curving to that path at all. I don't want it to wobble. A nice straight line through there. I'm sure these aren't that great either. Other things to notice and pay attention as you're going through this. I'm not finishing this cut by throwing my hands up into this position high here. I'm not getting my sword high above my head. I'm not coming through and going like this, right? This overextending through my body. I overextend my sword way out of line. I actually start losing the structure of my back hand to get my sword up there. That's not what we need to do. All we're looking for from here, I'm not going to call it ox, there's a little more point down. I'm letting my sword tip carry forward, but I'm not going all the way up, breaking my wrists. I'm not kind of flicking and throwing my sword high. I'm letting my arms stay straight, my wrists stay structured, and just pushing and turning. And that gives me these nice, smooth, easy cuts. So, building off of this idea, especially with the much easier, much more useful crossbody cut like this, if I'm doing this rising cut, I am moving offline. And this is one of the important things to learn to build into your fencing, build into your movement, of always moving offline with your cuts. And I know we're talking about longsword, but there's great lines in rapier where it says if you draw your crazy rapier distressa pentagrams and T-bolt circles on your floor, they look crazy. They're all mathematical and geometrical, but pretty universally, they talk about the center line, the line directly between your opponent, is death. You never want to move in that direction. There's lots of examples we can get into with wrestling and grappling where if my opponent's in the structure and I walk in, I'm giving up a lot of my structure into their strength, and you get countered, you get thrown, you get displaced. Same thing applies with weapons in your hand. If I throw cuts this way, even if I get my sword out there first, I'm not in structure when the clash is going to happen. When the swords cross, odds are I'm going to be off ground. I'm not going to be grounded. I'm not going to be where I need to be. So it's very important, no matter what weapon you're playing with, you start thinking about moving offline with your cuts. And these simple rising cuts here make that really obvious. It's very, very easy to throw a good, powerful cut, stepping off to your left from this side, your right from this side. You get to walk through, you get to pull your sword along with your body. Very easy, very intuitive, very simple to start picking up and feeling how that applies. Same thing applies to all our other cuts. If I throw this rising cut from here, like, yes, I can do it with a passing step straight ahead, but then I really start doing weird things with this arm and shoulder, and it works much better if I step off to my left, like this, right? I can step off to my right as well, and that gets into personal preferences. I am a strong believer that we should always be going left with our cuts, and as always, when I use those definitives, superlatives of always never, there's an asterisk there. It's if you know what you're doing, you can start breaking the rules, but as a good starting point, it's a good baseline for learning defense, learning to fight, learning to move. Stepping off to your left side as a right-handed fencer. That is is a better option. Lets you fence with the power of your body, is how it's described in the manuscripts. It just gives you much better setup, much better fight control, distance management than stepping away from the person as you cut. So some examples of that, some ways to play with that as you start getting used to things. First thing to address is, what does offline movement mean, right? And it is not a simple answer. I can't just say always move 30 degrees left or right of center when you want to attack towards your opponent. And that's probably a decent starting point. It's a good cue, but then you have to start thinking like you're protracting the ground. The simple truth is, when I think about moving offline, I think about being that jerk in high school who would shoulder check people as they walk by in the hallway. And that's the angle you're looking for. So this angle changes based on distance. If I'm really close to my opponent here, and I move offline to my left, it's going to look more like this, where I'm going to come through here and check into it. If I'm much further away and I've got a lot more distance between us, my offline motion is going to be here. Where if I keep walking, I'm going to hit it the same way, glancing off it with my shoulder, but it's not going to be the same direct motion here, because now we're not even fighting someone over there that you guys don't get to see. I want to fight the pal here. When I move offline, I should be thinking, I want to brush shoulders with it. And that's a very simple, very applicable, and constantly updating description of how to be moving offline. If your opponent moves, you can change your angle easily, instinctively, and just think about that, brushing that shoulder, brushing that strike, and following through with this. So how does this all pull together? So we've talked about in past sessions the Meyer figure. Quick recap, Meyer figure is 4 cuts. You attack different openings, and you can start in any of your 4 quadrants and working from there. Easiest one, starting from your dominant side. 1 here, 2nd is a rising cut, 3rd is a rising cut, 4th is a falling cut. So with these motions, it's a really simple pattern. First 2 cuts are on the same line. Change the height of your weapon. If you're high, you go low. If you're low, you go high. Next 2 cuts are on that line. And I'm back to the top, etc. ad nauseum. This is a training tool. It's really used to be getting used to changing guards or changing quadrants to attack from, so you're not just going left and right, back and forth all the time, or getting stuck in the same line of attack. It gets used to the idea that you just throw multiple cuts, you can start changing the path of your attacks as you move through there. As you start applying this to offline movement, again, this is where things get muddy, right? It makes no sense at all to, if I'm doing my Meyer figure, Meyer cuts in a walking progression, I'm not constantly going left and right, because with the Meyer cuts, the assumption isn't that I'm, fighting a pal that's always backing up and working these angles, right? That's not what it's used for. The Meyer figure, to me at least, is used for, I am at a close distance, I'm working here, I'm throwing my cuts, so I can do these motions quickly and smoothly and efficiently and attack multiple openings on a target. It is not used for walking across the floor. I'm not starting way back here, make sure I don't follow the camera, going, I'm coming at you, I'm going to hit you eventually. That's not the application of it. Application of the Meyer figure, well, it's good for crossing the floor, good for practicing your multiple cuts and multiple angles. It's really meant to be used, but we're in distance, we're a step away. My first cut comes here, second cut comes here, 3rd cut, and 4th cut. And you can start mixing and matching and adding your footwork in as you see fit, whenever you want to, and throwing the rest of the combination from there. So you can do drills where you leap to the side on your 3rd cut. So I throw 1 cut, 2 cuts, the opponent's backing away. Now I've got them, or they've parried this strike. I'm going to step across with my 3rd cut, recenter myself with my 4th cut. You can go the opposite, where the first strike is your attack at your opponent in range. You come here, then you just throw cuts 3 and 4, however you want. You can start mixing and matching, adding your footwork. The goal, though, is to get all this motion to be unconscious, just unconscious reactions of your body, right? If during the fight, you're sitting here thinking like, okay, I've got to throw this cut, right, and then this one comes next, and then I got to do this one, and then your feet stop moving, you're in trouble. Likewise, if I go, okay, I've got to move here, then I move this, and I got to step this, right? There are so many different facets to sword fighting, and so many of it is base level techniques that need to be done repeatedly and ingrained into your system that it can be, especially now in time of pandemic and isolation and social distancing, that, right, you're going to be sitting in your backyard, you're just doing your cuts. And how can you do these and make them useful and interesting? And just picking these random sets of drills of, I throw my cut, the second cut, I'm going to step across with, third cut, fourth cut, and pulling through there. If that's easy, that's comfortable, start to pick a new position to start from. Start with the rising cuts we've been talking about. First cut comes up, second cut comes down, change my height, third cut, fourth cut, moving through like that, and just getting yourself able to quickly and easily flow through these positions, quickly and easily be able to change your footwork so that you're not just stuck fighting in this line of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Get yourself in the habit of 1 comes across, 2 doesn't change much, 3 doesn't change much, 4 comes out the other side, right? And just shadow box with yourself. Give yourself new ways to move, new ways to react, new ways to think. Even in this very limited 4-cut pattern drill, there are so many variations, so many options you can play with your footwork. You can do it advancing, you can do it retreating, and just building up your basic instinctive vocabulary. And you'll be amazed with stuff you start pulling out when you do more advanced drilling, cooperative sparring, tournament types of sparring, things like that. So really building up your cutting vocabulary right now is the goal. Adding in these rising cuts with intention, with meaning to them, starting with those straight arms, pulling up and through. Once that becomes second nature, changing your ability to changing your ability to make those cuts from any starting position. Be able to start from here and realize like, oh, I need to throw a rising cut from my left to do something, whatever that something may be, I don't care. I'm down here and up and through before you even need to think about it. And just your body goes like, oh, I know how to do that. And even if in the heat of things, like, because that one was terrible, but I was instructor, I was rising, I probably did what I needed to. It may not have been perfect, it may have gotten stuck into Tommy, but if that's stopping a sword from hitting you, it's good enough. So don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone, experiment with things, play with things, see what you can make work. And again, just building up your basic internal vocabulary of movement, of cuts, of actions that you can then pull out when you need them. So super fundamentals today, building up these basics and building blocks, and hopefully getting to more useful things later. So that's it for tonight. I'll probably be back on Friday. I've got things going on this weekend, and I'll leave it there because it's a YouTube video. But I'll throw something up either tomorrow, Thursday night, or Friday night, and I'll see everyone back then. Thanks very much, guys.